Good morning, everybody. Keith Engle here for TGI Sports Talk. Are you serious? It's a Friday morning and it's rainy and sticky. Got some very fall-like weather here, though, here in the great Northeast. I think our good friend of our show, Jim Barringer, was on our neighborhood at SPAC last night. I'm waiting to hear back from him at the Eric Church concert. I'd like to have gone myself, but time did not allow, unfortunately. So I hope Jim had a great time there. Guys, we welcome everybody on Let's Talk. Well, we'll start with Let's Talk Sports, I guess. Northeast Streaming Sports, TGI Sports Talk, of course. Potentially Sideline Sports later on. I don't know what's going on there. We'll have to wait until our good friend at Let's Talk Sports, Dan Harris, is better, up and feeling better. And our best wishes and prayers go out to Dan as he continues his personal battle. So we hope he's doing better. You can catch us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. If you haven't watched us live, you can watch us or rewatch us. Or send it to your friends. Please like and share the show. Also go to TGI Sports Talk and all the other outlets I just talked about. Please follow those pages. I'll be joined by the Mad New Yorker here in just a minute. We'll get into some stuff. We'll talk about the Mets retiring Doc and Daryl's numbers this weekend and what might have been there. We'll talk about Ohtani. What's next for Ohtani in after surgery on his arm, and why is he not having surgery right away? I don't understand this at all. There's hundreds of millions of dollars being lost here. We'll talk about Steven Strasburg, another example in my mind of my theory about how babying young pitchers does not work. He's not a young pitcher anymore, but he was when he came up, and this is about the time this type of tact was taken with pitchers. So we'll talk about that, and maybe we'll get into our college football picks. We'll see how the hour goes. We could get into more. Who knows? With that, why is this music still going? And with that, we'll bring in our colleague, the Mad New Yorker, Carlos Chavez. Good morning, Carlos.
Morning, everybody. Happy Friday.
How are you today? We'll say good morning to Dave Guyette. We have yet to ask for Boone and Cash to be fired yet today. Big shout out to Dan to get better, buddy. Alec, we feel the same exact way. Welcome to you, Alec. And CA, good morning to you. What's going on in the city, Carlos? Things are,
I just got back this week. So it's been pretty nice here in the city. Tropical weather. You know how it is. It's raining like crazy now.
Like fall up here for the last week. Windows wide open. Today it's rainy and humid, but like you're talking about.
No, but the only island I know that the tropical weather is not consistent at all. So
no, this is true.
The island of New York. So
well, I only live here because my wife makes me. I'd be elsewhere if it were up to me, but that's another story. Let's get into it today. Today, I want to chat about, as I mentioned to you yesterday, because big news in New York. I mean, there's not a lot of baseball news other than, the Yankees trying to break 9-game winning streaks, losing series after series. It gets boring. I want to talk today about some big news in New York City this weekend. The Mets will retire Doc Gooden's number 16 and Daryl Strawberry's number 18. Great honor for them. Listen, these were two great ball players that unfortunately, due to outside circumstances, never met their total potential. I mean, both these guys, Doc was up at 19 years old. His best years were his first 2 years. Yeah. His career started downhill after he's 21 because of some drug issues. And Daryl, while better for a longer period of time, his best years were before he was 30 as well. What do you remember about these guys? I remember, again, I'm a little bit older than you, so I might remember this period better. I know you watched the documentary about the 86 Mets, which was tremendous. What was that called again?
Once Upon a Time in Queens.
Yeah, great documentary on ESPN if you get a chance to watch it. Two great players. What are your initial thoughts about this? It's certainly well-deserved, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a good time for the Mets organization, for the players themselves. After 30 years, a lot of other media and hoopla has died down about their lifestyles and what they chose to do. They've also been have had the opportunity to mature as older men, have been through a lot, and it's a good thing for the Mets fans and the New York fans, right? Who in that time in the mid '80s got to see good baseball, and they got to see young guys come up and perform, to their potential. They're on a team that was well balanced, with some, good veterans, Keith Hernandez, Gary Carter, a few guys like that. They had good pitching balance, they had Sid, they've had Ronnie, they had just a lot of guys on that staff that was, so that was a good baseball team, a fun time in New York, for the Mets fans, and it's good to see that they're getting their dues for what they accomplished. I'd say maybe within a 5-year span of their career average, right? Because one before the other, and they were able to do things that some hasn't been able to be repeated yet, right? So it's good for the Mets fans to get something positive out of the end of this season, and hopefully for next season have something to look forward to, with not knowing what's going to happen here. The news about whether Alonso was going to get traded or not, that sure blew up fast, and then the fact that they're not winning as much as they wanted to be, and they don't have the same players that they started out with. So it's something good for baseball, for New York, and for the Mets.
I think it's really a good time to kind of call back to the past. I mean, these are two guys, and again, this was a polarizing team. They had taken over New York from the Yankees at this point. Yankees still had good teams, but they weren't winning any division titles or pennants, obviously. Except for a couple of years, they still had good teams, flawed teams. The Mets, you talked about that. They came up within a year of each other. Darryl came up at 21 years old, I think, in 1983, and Doc at 19 in 84.
No, I believe they were both. One was 19 and the other was just turned 20.
Strawberry was 21, according to the Baseball Reference, but which is my Bible. So maybe he just turned 21.
Yeah, he just turned 20. Yeah, that's what it was. Okay.
Doc in that his first All-Star game, I remember. I'm trying to remember if it was that first year. Let me take a quick look here. It's Strasburg. We'll talk about later. Doc's first All-Star game, I think, was as a rookie when he started, and as a 19-year-old.
19-year-old, yeah.
And was just phenomenal in that game. Doc came out through heat. And again, by the way, and we're not going to talk about this now. We'll transition into this. This was before we started babying pitchers.
Well, you have to understand who's
played 16 games in his second year. 16 games.
I believe the first thing that we need to look at is the 19-year-old pitcher was pitching to a Gary Carter of the Montreal Expos.
Great catch.
Who after the game was shocked and stated plenty of times, I wouldn't mind him, pitching on my team. And he eventually gets traded to the Mets because Gooden and everybody else saw that the performance, they were able to make that work somehow or another, in the background of things. So he eventually was pitching to Gary Carter in the '86 World Series, or season.
Well, before that, Carter got there, I think, in '84 as well. Didn't he? I'm pretty sure Carter got there in '84. So he was pitching to him even as a rookie before this team really gelled.
Right.
And Rick is right. These guys, both up in this area, in fact, too. Darryl Strawberry is part of the New York State Baseball Hall of Fame. I'm not sure if Doc is or not. He probably ought to be if he isn't. They have both spoken openly about their struggles, and they went on for a long time. And Darryl had some other health issues too, prostate cancer and some other issues that he battled through. And both of them were able to come back a bit. But again, the best part of their careers were the first part of their careers. Doc was never as good after he was 21 years old mostly because of, he couldn't he couldn't beat this drug problem then as a young man, right? And whether he got help from the organization he should have gotten, who knows?
Right.
Because I know I've talked to Kevin Mitchell on my shows, and Kevin got traded away from that 86 team because they felt he was a bad influence on them when he said they were the ones trying to get him in trouble. But again, they were young men, and it's hard to come. It's a disease, and it's hard to overcome. I'm not blaming them. Doc did come back with the Yankees later on, pitch a no-hitter with the Yankees.
He did.
Yeah. Other than that, he was pretty up and down. I think the year he pitched a no-hitter, he actually had an earned run average over 5. But again, this was a great time to be a Met fan. Those teams were, as you said, were very exciting. As a Yankee fan, it was a little discouraging watching the Mets contend year after year, where my team was kind of in the doldrums, kind of like they are now.
Yeah, I mean, well, they had that run for 3 years. They should have been able to do 5 years, but they just couldn't get it together to, 87, 88. Well,
they make the playoffs in 88, and they lose to an inferior Dodger team that we all know went on to shock the A's in the World Series. That was a team that people were surprised that dynasty didn't go longer, and they only got one World Series victory out of it. But that was,
and again, it was to the detriment of his health and the things that he was doing, because Doc was not partaking in those last 2 seasons like he was in the first 2 that he was in. So, but I mean, that's all history, and I say it's a good thing for New York because they did come back and win with the Yankees, even though they were older, they're more mature. I wouldn't say mature in the sense of their livelihood, but mature as far as like being baseball players, right? Because at the end of the day, as long as you do your job and try to do the best of your ability, that's what's most important. And that's how a lot of baseball owners see it, right? As long as they come to the ballpark and do their job, what they do in their life is something that they have to take care of. And
which these are adults, and I get it, but I find it a little ironic. And again, we're going to talk more about this. And again, this is because of the business of the game. Organizations are more worried about babying pitchers in their development than they are about the bad habits they acquire off the field, i.e. drugs, alcohol, whatever demons they might have. And these guys both had the kind of same demons. It's kind of ironic that they came up around the same time. They fell to the same demons. And you're right. They did recover. They have gone out and spoken about this and helped other people. Later on, pretty much during their careers, they continue to struggle with this on and off. But it was interesting how their careers came full circle in a way, and they finished their careers with the Yankees, both of them, and contributed to World Series winners there, as you said. So
I do want to add that not just these players, but a lot of players that fell to a lot of different issues that had to deal with all kinds of drugs. Baseball has changed in from that time frame to today, but it still doesn't mean that those things and those problems don't exist for players. But baseball has been doing, since the late 90s, a better job of trying to police themselves and other organizations under them to not have these situations happen. They haven't been doing they've been doing better. I wouldn't say they've done a great job, but they've been doing better. And the thing that helps the players here in New York now is that most of them don't live in the New York area. Also New York has changed a lot since those times. So those are 2 factors that now New York players for the Yankees and the Mets don't deal with as much. So
I'll come back to that comment in a second. I wanted to add something there. And now at the time that this all started to take off, I remember very well 1987 when Doc went into rehab. And to me, it was a shock. I was still only 27 years old, so I was a bit naive. But baseball, we hadn't seen drugs explode yet on the sports scene. We started to in the early 80s with the Pittsburgh drug trials, but it was still a shock to see a guy at the top of his game. Well, actually, he'd been struggling, and this kind of explained why. He wasn't quite the pitcher he was his first 2 years. But this was kind of a shock at this time. He's not a guy who would have expected it out of from what you saw from his public persona, I think. Daryl didn't surprise me a lot or whatnot, and there were other guys that would not have surprised me. But Doc always did surprise me. And Kenny brings up a good point here that it's a choice. It's a beginning. It is a choice at the beginning. I agree. It becomes a sickness later on. I can call it a sickness. And again, you don't have to, Kenny, but to me later on, once you've gotten caught by that demon, it is hard to fight it. In the beginning, it is your choice, though, what direction you take. And good morning, Kenny. Let's say good morning to a couple before I let you elaborate there. Let's say a couple good mornings. We said hi to CA. Bob, my dad, good morning.
Good morning, Bob.
Rick is here with us, as we said. Kenny's now joined us, and you can kind of elaborate on what I just said if you like.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they're getting recognition for what they did on the field. And what I dislike about the situation and what we're talking about now is they just keep bringing up the past and their own personal lives. And, this is kind of like the situation and the issues that Hall of Fame and NFL and MLB have issues with. It's like, do we put these guys in do we give them for their participation, do we give them the award and for what they've, the recognition that they deserve, or because they've had some bad lifestyle choices, do we keep them out? So
yeah, to Kenny's point, Mike Civic, he was a local guy here where we played in the same league we did, and when we weren't, now the area turns out a decent number of professional players. It did at the time. This was a big deal. He was a really good pitcher, and I did not know that he had these demons, Kenny, so I'll take Kenny's word for it. But Mike was a really good pitcher, and I know that he turned his life around if he did have those problems, so good for him. And CA has a great point here, too. It did all start to change because around the same time, we had the Len Bias tragedy. For those who don't remember, he was drafted number 1 by the Celtics on draft night, and the next day he was dead from a cocaine overdose. And, it wasn't there was a lot of people that tried to portray that as something he just got caught up in that night, but he had about, $10,000 worth of cocaine under the seat of his car in case he liked it, I guess. But Len Bias was a great player out of Maryland. And listen, the Celtics would have continued a dynasty that they had in the 80s if Len Bias had survived. So he's right. This was one of the high-profile things. Doc Gooden a year later, a high-profile thing. So things did start to change as far as being aware of these issues.
Yeah, and I believe, like, I can't recall the book I read, but they have put so much emphasis on cocaine and heroin that they let the whole steroids thing kind of just start going underneath, and they're only testing for certain things. And
well, there was a lot of other issues.
It was just a different time for baseball.
Before cocaine, it was greenies. They were all using amphetamines before, which is something they do tests for now. But again, you know what? They find testing ways to test for drugs, whatever it is, steroids, greenies, cocaine. They'll find a way around it. The players that need to, and again, I don't want to lump everybody in together here, but the players that are want to find a way around the punishment will find a way to beat these tests. So anyway, let's see what you got here. Did I say? I think I covered that already. Yeah, I did. Okay, good. Anyway, I think it's a great honor for them. It's good. I think it's good for the Mets to revisit their past. This was a great team, and again, it fell apart a little faster than it should have. Some guys got old, like Carter and Hernandez. They weren't spring chickens when they won in '86, but they made some interesting moves and traded some young guys like Kevin Mitchell out of New York, and that was, I think, helped this. So Doc and Daryl's issues, and then trading away some guys they thought were problem players and guys that were leaders on that team like Ray Knight, I think is what precipitated this downfall for the Mets. Quickly, by the way. It's funny. There was a book, speaking of books, I think it was the 1989 Mets, I think. It might have been 90. The one of Bobby Bonilla's teams. When they had Bonilla and they had Saberhagen and they had brought in a bunch of guys.
Vince Coleman and all those guys.
Yeah, and Bob Klapisch, who used to write for the Post, wrote a great book called The Worst Team Money Can Buy, which probably was accurate up until this year's Mets. So this is probably the worst team money can buy because there was a lot more money spent on this mess, obviously. One more thing from Kenny before we I want to segue into something else. So drugs were prevalent in the 70s, sports. Yeah, but they weren't calling guys out. They were brushing a lot of this stuff under the table in the 70s. It wasn't until the Pittsburgh drug trials, and I want to say it was in 82. I could be wrong. Keith Hernandez was caught up in that. Dave Parker, a lot of really big names were caught up in these trials. And that's when it really started to come to the forefront. And players were, being covered up by organizations, brushed under the table. And the media didn't report things like that then, right? They looked the other way. So the world's different now. You can't get away with it. If you do it, you're going to be found out. Yeah, I want to segue too from there. And guys, if you want to continue a conversation, we can certainly go back if we have to. But I talked about Doc and probably being the last generation of pitchers who, as they were brought up through the minor leagues, even high school, college, he didn't go to college, but they were not babied. They didn't have innings limits in the minor leagues. They went out and they threw between starts. They threw every day, basically, and they built up arm strength, and they were allowed to complete what they started and allowed to pitch through jams. And a different story came out here the same day. Stephen, oh geez, I missed the S on his name. Sorry about that, Stephen. So Tefan Strasburg has retired yesterday. He's not a youngster anymore, but when he came up in 2010, he was the next big phenom. He had tremendous stuff, and he had the potential to be one of the great pitchers of all time. And this is about the time, the thing that I rail on all the time, the way organizations baby pitchers. He comes up in 2010, and they only let him pitch so many innings. He still gets hurt in 2011 with Tommy John surgery. Comes back in 2012, is having a tremendous season. They again shut him down to try to protect him. They probably cost themselves a chance to win a World Series because they had a great team that year, the Nationals. And then his entire career, he's battled arm injuries. And again, I will contend, because we're seeing a plethora of this again today. Ohtani hurt this week with an arm injury. We've seen arm injuries every day. There's a new one. I still contend it's the way these pitchers are babied from the time they start their careers in the minor leagues right through the time they get here. And Steven Strasburg is a cautionary tale of what is wrong with the way we treat young pitchers. This guy should have been an all-time great. Yeah. And it derailed him. Nothing else derailed him but injuries.
Yeah, I'm going to go the other way and think just to say that.
I knew you would.
I mean, it's the amount of throwing that they do that gets them to this situation, and it's not babying them. It's just making sure that they have enough for the next game. And like players don't know what they can do until they're on the mound, anyways. And then the coaches don't know what's going on because that's not their body. And then the training staff has to make sure that they're the movements that they're doing that are not natural movements anyways is being is consistent enough to where the body can take this kind of like punishment. Look, I mean, you're making it sound like
the body took this kind of punishment for 100 years before they started to change.
Yeah, but it's not the same game. They don't throw at the same speed. They don't throw the same arm angles. You're talking about a kid that played 121 innings in college.
They don't throw the same speed. Ryan didn't throw 104 miles an hour.
Before the first year of Major League Baseball, he had 121 innings total for San Diego State. Not that might not mean much to some people, but what arm angles, what speeds was he throwing out in college? Like, what was he doing to get to that, to be able to pitch 121 innings? How many times was he warming up? How many times was he, getting that extra exercise in the in the bullpen just to make sure he was warmed up for the next, you making it sound like these guys will just pitch and then go home. That's not how that happens, man. That's how it happened before in the past, but that's not how it happens. And these kids and these guys are throwing as kids, man. They're throwing, 40, 50 innings as 6, 7-year-olds. I've seen it because I was assistant coach, and they're like, okay, we got to put a pitch count on these kids because they'll
when they're 10, I get it.
Games in a row if you allow them.
When they're 10, I understand. But now when they're
he's already getting the retirement because he has thoracic nerves, that thoracic situation, the thoracic outlet syndrome. So
several different things, yes.
So amongst all the Tommy John and all the other stuff that he's had in the past. So it's not like, it's because he quit pitching and he can't pitch more than 80 pitches in a game, Keith. You gotta be sensible, and you gotta understand that these are things also that I'm mentioning that are being studied in multiple and plethora different universities and under medical terms, not just like
overstudy
about statistics. This is stuff that's going on in the medical field and written in medical journals from universities with players in all different types of leagues.
So how did guys like Tom Seaver, Nolan Ryan, I can go on and on, pitch more than 4,000 innings? Nolan Ryan pitched more than 5,000 innings.
How many type of pitches did these guys have?
His last no-hitter.
I remember reading a book where Tom Seaver was like, I had 2 pitches, fast and very fast.
Tom Seaver.
Fast could have been anywhere from 60 to 75 miles an hour, and really fast was like 80 plus.
By the way, Tom Seaver had more than 2 pitches, especially later in his career. He transferred
later in his career
as he got older.
Yeah, but same thing with Nolan Ryan.
Effectively, with very few arm problems. He did have some arm problems, but they fixed them. You know what? These guys would throw every day. It wasn't even just the innings that they pitched. They threw between starts. Everybody did.
Well, you have to, but it gets to a point where
these guys had 15 and 20-year careers. Nolan Ryan had a 25-year career. I mean, again, Nolan Ryan pitched 5,000 innings. Guys won't pitch 5,000 innings. The entire staff of the American League East won't pitch 5,000 innings. Every pitcher, you can add them all up. They won't all pitch 5,000 innings in their entire career. All of them.
And Ohtani already had Tommy John, 2 years ago?
Ohtani had, this will be his second Tommy John surgery. Yes, and a lot of guys have 2. But again, these injuries aren't new. They were happening years ago. Guys even pitched through them, for crying out loud, because they didn't have the technology to fix them. And now guys have this. I find totally ironic, the way we baby pitchers. Some of these pitchers go have Tommy John surgery proactively before they even need it.
That was happening in the early 2000s.
Yeah, it's probably gone away.
In New Jersey, it was a huge case because they had kids that were doing it so that arms can get stronger because they were younger. There was a case in New Jersey and in the East Coast because there was a practitioner doing it, and it should have been illegal, actually, even though the parents were letting it happen. So, those things, okay. Keith, at the end of the day, it's always under the pitcher themselves, right? To pitch so much, but then it's also under the coaching staff to understand that sometimes you got to take these guys out. What's his name for the Mets? He pitched that no-hitter. He should have went out 2 innings before that game ended, but he just kept going. And after that no-hitter, he couldn't pitch anymore.
Well, we look at every pitch like it's
Johan Santana. Come on.
He didn't pitch a no-hitter, by the way. He lost his no-hitter, didn't he? Didn't he lose that? Didn't he lose that no-hitter? He left him in 137 pitches, I think, and then he got a hit. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think he pitched a no-hitter that day, though. Pitched a great game. But again, nobody would have been taken out 40 years ago in that game. Nobody ever came out of a no-hitter. Now they come out of no-hitters after they throw 50 or 60 pitches, 5 innings. You're losing a chance for guys to have historic type of games. It's bad for fans. It's bad for the players. And again, Rick's talking about young guys here having, I don't know what level you're talking about. I'm not saying that. And hell, when I was a kid, in Wee Men, which was I don't know what level you want to talk about it. Babe Ruth.
You just say age group, so it's like under 7,
yeah,
under 10, whatever it is.
Up to a certain point, yes, kids have to develop their arms. They shouldn't be able to throw curveballs and sliders when they're 10. I get that, But once your arm and body has started to develop and you're heading into a Major League Baseball career, then you start to strengthen your arm, not make it so they're babied and the first sign of trouble they come out. And by the way, I started to say, we look at pitch counts and we look at it and say every 100 pitches is the same. 100 pitches thrown is a benchmark. Let's just say. So there are games where 100 pitches are 90 of them are easy pitches, easy. And you can pitch 50 pitches and 40 of them are hard, and that's difficult on your arm, and you've got to know the difference. And they don't pay any attention to that. They chart the pitches and the number and don't pay attention to the ones that really put stress on your arm. It's similar. It's a stupid way to go about it. Similar to, when you see stats in football, like, well, this team is, only completing 40% of their third down conversions. Like 3rd and inches is the same as 3rd and 25.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not the same. And these pitches that these guys throw aren't all taking the same toll on their arms. Sometimes you throw into easy 120 pitch game. It's just a fact,
Yeah, but that's
can get hurt.
That's up to again the coaching staff and the pitcher themselves who's throwing this. Like you're probably throwing an example out there of one of the Mets players who do the knuckleball. That didn't have no effect on his arm because he's just lofting that ball up there.
Well, you're still having to make it to the plate.
But then he switched it up and he had like a knuckle fastball. What's his name?
No, by the way, that is not my example. My example.
No, what I'm saying
at the time is Nolan Ryan is my example every time we have this conversation. Every time.
What was it? I can't remember this guy's name. Something with a D.
I know. Yeah, I know you're the guy you're talking about.
He came from Toronto. Like, so you could see what he was throwing on the, what speeds he was throwing at, and then you were like, okay, and he could last longer than a couple other pitchers, but that doesn't mean that there was any stress on his body for throwing a knuckleball, right?
Listen, throwing knuckleball is not as hard as throwing a ball 100 miles an hour. I will not disagree with you there at all.
Right, but the stress on his arm isn't the same as somebody who's throwing,
I just said sliders. That. Yes, I agree. I agree 100%. But again, that doesn't change.
So you can't sit there and say that if you keep throwing the ball, you're gonna have less arm injuries. That's not how that works.
It is how it works. It worked for 100 years.
That's not. But
there are more arm injuries and more career-ending injuries today than there were 40 years ago.
Because there was less than 4 different types of throws that these guys did.
No,
these guys just well back and threw the ball.
No, they threw sliders. Sandy Koufax's out pitch was a slider. They threw all these pitches. We haven't invented pitches in the last 20 years.
I'm not saying that they reinvented pitches. What the velocity that some of these guys are throwing is not the same as it was in the past.
No, Nolan Ryan threw 100. Seaver threw in the high 90s. Gibson threw 100. Yeah, nobody threw 100 miles an hour before. Nobody. That's new too. No, they just wanted to go out there and throw gas for 50 pitches and then get them out of there. They threw other pitches besides their fastball. Nolan Ryan had the best curveball in the history of baseball in my mind. Maybe Burt Blyleven, but Nolan Ryan.
Look, from where I'm, for my age group, one of the best pitchers I've ever seen who mixed it up and was able to stay in the game has been Greg Maddux. He wasn't just throwing heat; he's throwing all kinds of stuff.
Kenny, I got it better. Let's just use a tee. We don't even use a pitching machine because we don't want to waste the electricity either. So we'll just put a tee out there and play.
Well, if you put a machine out there, you're gonna have to put all the wiring out there, and maybe the players will trip because
they'll have a whole nother plethora of injuries for stupid reasons. For crying out loud! I just dropped my mouse. Anyway, I guess we'll agree to disagree. But to me, Steven Strasburg, today it just brings it all back for me that this is when it started. That's about the time it started. 2010, we started babying pitchers, and good God. Let me move on. Since we're talking about arm injuries, let's talk about another one that happened this week. We just talked about Ohtani having a UCL tear, which will lead to the second Tommy John surgery.
If he chooses.
This is the thing. If he wants to pitch again, he almost has to. Well, I guess he doesn't have to.
You don't have to pitch.
What's a Japanese pitcher pitch for the Yankees? He pitched for like 8 years here, rather, I should say,
Tanaka?
with a tear. No, the last one they had.
Tanaka.
Yeah, was that his name? That's, it feels like 10 years ago since he's been here. I know it's only been about 4 or 5.
And he's still pitching.
He tore his ulnar ligament the first year he was here and never had surgery. But he also wasn't the same pitcher after that either.
Yeah, he came well back and throw that slider that he wanted.
This is the worst case scenario for Ohtani. He doesn't get traded into a pennant race. He stays with the Angels. I guess for Ohtani and the Angels, they try to trade to show him they're all in to win, and that falls on their face because they go into a horrible funk after that. Now he gets an arm injury. He was going to be a $500 million player because he could play both ways. Is he going to pitch again? Sure. And by the way, there's also talk he may not have surgery. I think he's going to have the surgery. Why wouldn't you have it now? This is a year injury. Well, once he has it, he probably can't hit either. That's the thing. He'll be out for a year, at least pitching wise. Hitting wise, he could probably come back in May next year if he had a surgery now. But he's not going to. What's the point of not having surgery? They're out of the race.
He's just looking at his options as far as health wise.
Well, if you got an injury, the best option is to take care of it as soon as possible, not later. I mean, it's going to hurt him in free agency if he's going to have the surgery in the offseason and miss more time at the beginning of next year. Now, he's still a young guy. He's only 29, I think, right?
Yeah.
But this guy, I mean, it's probably hundreds of $millions that have gone down the drain here for him in any event.
He should have, well, at the end of the day, he should have just been able to, he was trying to make his own path, right? So, I mean, everything, like Keith mentioned before, you can't avoid injuries. Injuries are going to happen.
That was Kenny. That wasn't me, but I do agree with him.
So, but there's a couple players in baseball who try to make their own path and try to see, what they can get out of, things. And sometimes it doesn't work out for them. Not just in baseball, but in other sports as well. So, opportunities come and go, man. And this is an opportunity now. On the flip side, for all the bidders out there who are trying to, convince Ohtani that their team is where he should be at in the future because they're going to win a championship with him on the team, and so it's still not going to be as bad as he thinks it is because he can't pitch. I'm sure the Giants, the Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees are all going to throw the biggest bids that they can to try to get him anyway. So, well,
first of all, he'll probably use the Padres. He'll only use the Mets and Yankees to drive up the price because he doesn't want to come east. He wants to stay on the West Coast. But is he going to get a 10-year contract with this injury now?
And if I were Ohtani, I would only do a 3-year contract anyway, a 2-year with an option.
Why?
Because you could do it again in 2 more years.
But if I could get 10 years at $50 million now, I'm guaranteed.
Yeah, but the guarantees are less. The guarantee is less of a percentage, the more on the front you get. So, why get one guarantee when you can get 2 or 3 or 4?
Yeah, but you're not going to get 4 shots at this. You're not going to get.
I mean, listen, if he's just a DH hitter and he's consistent.
If he became a free agent 2 more times, he's not going to get $500 million if like he would have gotten, and could still.
Depends.
Guaranteed. And you make it sound like the money. He's getting every nickel of that if he signed a contract for 10 years, $500 million next year, and got hurt right away, he's getting all of his money. All of these guys are getting guaranteed contracts. This isn't football. This money is 100% guaranteed for almost all of these guys.
There's guys like what's his name for the Yankees is getting paid, and it doesn't matter what his performance is.
Stanton. You're talking about? No, again, they're not performance based. They're not anything. The players' union won't let them sign performance based contracts. I mean, I have no problem with guys getting every nickel they can.
I would do it because it depends on where he ends up. If he doesn't want to go to the East Coast, but then he still wants to play for the Yankees, why not play 3 years and then go back to LA or San Diego, wherever else that he could retire at?
I think it's possible. I think it's possible you could see him sign a 1-year deal and then go back on the market because who knows what the market's going to be for him now after this injury, depending on what he does surgery-wise, and whether he can pitch again. Now, he's a great hitter.
Let's not kid ourselves. He's done what no other baseball player has done in our lifetime. So there is a market for him. It doesn't matter if he's throwing the ball or not. just him holding the stick, he's gonna get paid, man.
By the way, he's done what no other pitcher has done in the history of a player has done in the history of baseball. No, people talk about Babe Ruth, and I know that I have a couple of followers that think Ohtani's just a creation of ESPN. He's not. He's a freak of nature, and no player in the history of baseball has done what he's done, and that's pitch and hit regularly at the same time. Babe Ruth was done pitching by the time he became a great hitter. He was a great hitter when he was pitching, but only when he pitched. He didn't play every day the other days.
Right.
People lose sight of that. Ohtani's doing something nobody's ever done.
Well, don't get it mixed up, because the owners haven't lost sight of that. Everybody's chomping at the bit who has money to be able to pick this guy up.
Great player. I'm not short thrifting him.
I've even heard that Mariners are willing to make some changes and even try to pick him up, and they're not. They're not.
Seattle's a good landing spot for him. A lot of the Japanese players have played in Seattle because there's a huge Japanese population there.
Yeah.
And others, they had Japanese ownership.
If I'm Ohtani, I'd be like, okay, I'll go to the Mets or I'll go to the Yankees. I'll play 1 or 2 years, and then I'll go to Seattle, San Diego, LA, go back to the Angels. Who cares? Like, make money, son. That's what you came to the United States to be a player in the Major League Baseball. Take advantage of it, man.
But if I'm the Yankees or I'm the Mets or on any team, I'm not signing them to a 2-year contract now, because year one I'm going to get
look. If that's all that's on the table, and it's better to get him than not to get him at all. It's better than what your team has at the moment.
Again, I might want to get him, but I want to sign him to a longer-term contract because I'm going to lose all of next year, most of next year. I'm not going to.
You're missing the point. This is business. It's not baseball anymore. This is about business and money.
Not missing the point at all. Why am I signing a guy to a 2-year contract when I'm going to lose him for nearly a year of that, possibly? I bet you he does not sign it's going to be a long time into the winter till people see what the medicals look like.
I don't think so.
Or he signs.
If you do that, then you a sucker, because you waited on a sure bet of at least one position, a position player. Because you wanted him to pitch, to hit, and to field, but you're at least getting him to hit, if anything at all.
I'm having trouble deciphering CA's message here, which I often have. I need you to kind of decipher that a little for me, CA, so I know what we're talking about. Let's hope he's not the next Bo Jackson. Another good example of, again.
But Rick, he's already performed as a major league player in a different.
So had Bo.
He played in Japan. He's already performed at a high level in Japan. He came here because he felt like Japan, the league in Japan was not as good as the league is here in the United States.
Or money-wise as well, by the way.
Yeah, of course, money. But still, like, his thing was like, I want to be the best player in the world, and I did it in Japan. Now I want to do it in the U.S. So that's what he stated, and that's what he was living on. I think
to Rick's point is Bo Jackson had a lot of career ahead of him, and so does Ohtani. And that's what, let's not hope he's not the next Bo Jackson. Bo's surgery was much more intense when you're having a hip replacement surgery. Yeah. For him to even attempt to come back and play baseball was remarkable. And by the way, we talk about great athletes. There's nobody. Watch another great ESPN 30 for 30 is you don't know Bo. There's no athlete in the history of sports like Bo Jackson. He could do anything. He could have done anything he wanted to do. Anything.
Well, I think him and Jim Brown, but I don't know.
I'll give you Jim Brown, but I think Bo was. I just think Bo was more versatile than Jim Brown. Even, I mean, Jim Brown was a great athlete, one of the best, probably the best lacrosse player ever to play. Besides being one of the best, or maybe the best football running back.
Didn't Jim Brown also run track and field?
He probably did. I don't know for a fact. I just know his lacrosse history and football history, obviously. But Bo chose to play football. He could have played any sport he wanted to play. He could have been an Olympic athlete. He could have been anything. So again, I do hope. I agree with Rick here. I hope it isn't that type of situation.
I mean, listen, this is a guy that no matter what happens next year, the opportunities are endless for him. I mean, they're not gonna, just because he's not pitching, they're not all just gonna go away. He's not a one position player.
Well, Again, even if he has surgery, he's going to miss part of next year. Bryce Harper wasn't available to play until May this year, and that was about 2 months earlier than they thought when he had the same surgery last year.
And Keith, how long do you think he can play for? Like, he
could play 10 more years, easy.
Oh, geez, here we go. At the level that he's playing, he could play 10 more years?
That's not what you asked me. You asked me how long he could play.
I'm sure after 2 or 3 seasons, he's going to make his multi-position bring it down to maybe 2.
Well, I would say that he would choose to be ahead. He will give up the pitching at some point anyway. But at 29 years old, when he still had a lot of, the guy's one of the best pitchers in baseball.
That's that's not an argument. My thing is that you're saying the potential of what he has to gain signing any team signing him, like that possibility is not. It's less possibility. I'm telling you, it's probably more now because that he's only playing 2 positions instead of 3.
Yeah, well, it's also going to cost him money because he's 1 player now, not 2.
Well, the money is it's going to cost him because he's the value is there.
Kenny brings up the greatest athlete of all time was Secretariat. Listen, I don't disagree. He was a great athlete, and he gets short-thrifted, and people say, "Oh, he's an animal." When ESPN did their Sports Century Top 100 Athletes, Secretariat finished in the top 3, and there was a lot of controversy. And I agreed. The problem is, Kenny, he can't play any other sports except horse racing. I don't think he can play baseball or football. That's the only reason I would give you that Bo's a better athlete. And I don't think it's Kirk Cousins, if that's who he's talking about. Oh, God. Anyway.
Well, Kirk Cousins, I mean, there's been a few players that try to, make their own path in sports. And
well, there have been a lot who
that go to bigger contracts. But, I mean.
Well, guys have switched sports. I mean, Dave DeBusschere started out in baseball and became a great NBA player.
Michael Jordan took some time off.
Michael Jordan played baseball very badly while he was suspended. Retired from the NBA.
Deion Sanders played.
Yeah, Deion should have stuck to football. He was exciting when he did hit the ball, but he wasn't consistent enough.
The guy went to the World Series. They didn't win, but he went to the World Series twice.
Well, that doesn't mean he's a great ball player just because he was on a great team.
He was part of the great team. If it wasn't for Deion Sanders, they wouldn't have had. How many steals did he have for Atlanta?
Deion Sanders was a marginal Major League Baseball player at best.
Whoa.
At best. He was an exciting player. I'll give you that. If he hit the ball, he was exciting to watch run the bases. And he could steal base, obviously, when he got on base, but he didn't hit enough to say was a really good baseball player.
They didn't put him in all the time because he played football.
Brian Jordan, who played in the same defensive backfield with him in Atlanta, was a better baseball player, a much better baseball player than Deion.
Really?
Yes, he played with the Cardinals.
Yeah, I know who he played with, but I'm surprised that you mentioned him.
Much better baseball player. Not a better football player. Deion was a better football player.
Do you think he made the Cardinals better, though?
Yeah, I do. I think he was a really good player for a period of time. And the Cardinals had good teams during that stretch. I don't think they won any World Series in that.
No, not. Well, neither did the Braves Neither did the Yankees or the Braves with Deion Sanders.
Well, I know the Yankees didn't because they were kind of in their down period. But Atlanta might have won the World. No, they probably didn't. I'm trying to remember the year that Tim McCarver was having a fit, if you remember. They might have won the NLCS, but Deion was going around pouring champagne on McCarver's head. That's all he wanted to do because McCarver was ripping him right and left that he wasn't a player. He's only playing because he was a gimmick and all this other stuff. So Deion took every opportunity he could during a post-game celebration to douse McCarver with where am I going here? With champagne. And McCarver pointed it out on national TV. Anyway, moving on real quick. Since we're hitting week 0 this week, which there's not a lot of great games. There's a couple of interesting matchups. One in Ireland, which probably will be a blowout, but at least football's back. At least college football's back, and we got real games to talk about instead of realignment and everything else. I went through my college football playoff picks Wednesday, which I will repeat today, and I'll give you a chance to give me your picks and a champion. And just to remind you, I don't think you were with us Wednesday, Carlos. I picked couple of chalk teams in a way, Georgia, Ohio State, and then I picked Florida State and Oklahoma to be the 4 finalists in this year's college football playoff. And Rick will like to hear, as I've said a couple of times, because I was such a naysayer last year, I am sticking with the Georgia Bulldogs until they lose to be the first team in 70-some years to win 3 national championships in a row.
Ooh, you talking about taking it the whole way?
That's right. That's right.
I don't know that. The thing is, the SEC's they got a little different this year, so I think Georgia will be maybe 4th, coming 4th, but I don't think they'll come in first.
I'll come back to this, Anthony, in a second. Well, so give me your 4 picks. So you don't think Georgia will win the SEC? They will not be in the college football playoff, you're saying?
Well, I think maybe Alabama will get them this year.
I think Alabama's overrated this year. I think they're rated as high as they are because they're Alabama. They got some problems at quarterback. They got some problems at wide receiver. I'm not sure that they're going to be overcome them. Now, Nick Saban is the best college football coach of all time. He could very well figure that out.
I think the defense on Alabama, they have a lot of return players are going to keep them in the game. If they keep the offense balanced, I think they'll be in it to win it. I think Georgia's going to find themselves in. Look, I wasn't a big Stetson Bennett fan from the get, but I think they're gonna miss a guy, and I think it's gonna be hard.
Back-to-back national championships is that's you can't be terrible, that's for sure. I wasn't a believer in the beginning either. You win back-to-back championships, you win me over.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I don't know if they got a guy with that kind of like, how do I say? I don't say leadership, but that like.
Well, leadership is a good word. You don't like to use the word.
No, I don't like to use it because it's I think it's overrated sometimes. But I think
shocking to hear you say that.
That what is that? Innate ability to have people to get through the games, right? Because Stetson Bennett was as cool as a cucumber, man. He was kind of like an Eli Manning, like, there's still an opportunity, there's still a chance. You need guys like that in college football now because it's so crazy, it's so competitive. And I don't know if Georgia has that.
And by the way, Georgia's got, I think Beck is the replacement. Rick can probably correct me if I'm wrong. But unproven. Stetson Bennett was unproven. Stetson Bennett, they tried to replace every single time they gave him the job. They tried to replace him up to his senior year. Yeah. And he kept winning the job. So you don't know until these guys, and you've said this before about different situations, until they play.
Yeah.
And Georgia's got enough athletes around them to get around, I think, a quarterback learning his way.
But
the job.
The thing in the SEC is that they've had a slew of quarterbacks that were athletic, a slew of teams that were athletic, and some of these teams sometimes didn't make it to a national championship. For example, the Auburn Tigers with Cam Newton, Cadillac, and they didn't make it. So a couple Florida teams didn't make it. So it's LSU. LSU is going to be a different team this year. I feel like they're going to try to do some things. The SEC is going to be tough to gauge. I'm going to make my picks after next week.
So I put it on the agenda today, and you won't make your picks. Come on, how much time do you need? Nobody else is playing this week. You want to see how Notre Dame?
I'm just because I've been looking at some of these kids, some injuries, the kids that come in from the transfer portal to see how they perform in practice and things like that. But no, I'll go out and say, okay, so Alabama.
I'll let you change your picks next week.
All right, fine.
I'll give you a gimme.
I'll do Alabama, Michigan. You said 4, right?
Well, that's how many play in the playoff. Yes, 4.
Alabama, Michigan. Georgia will be my 4th team. So what's my wild card team? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'll give you 3 out of the 4.
Give me your winner. Is your winner in that 3? I hope.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going for Alabama this year. Just I saw what they were doing in practices and stuff like that. I've been watching them. I've been watching a lot of SEC football. I think a lot of teams are going to improve. A lot of teams taking a step back. So I don't want to say this because he's watching, but I think Georgia take a step back.
I said it last year, and I was wrong. So
I mean, I say it because again, I think the esprit de corps is not the same that it was last year. You know,
they lost 15 guys a year before.
15 players, man.
Before last year, they lost 15.
Yeah, they lost 15, and then this year they lost what, 9, something like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, not the quality of players they lost the year before, though.
8, 9. Yeah, but
now to me, and Stetson Bennett is the biggest guy they got to replace because leadership does mean something, and that's the guy they got to replace.
Yeah, you got the guy who's throwing the ball is the one who's
didn't think much of your picks in the draft, Carlos. I'm not sure. Must have been with the football draft we did. I'm not sure.
I'm gonna throw a wild card in there. Maybe Washington.
I like Washington's chances. I almost had them in the playoff. And to Anthony's point, he's got Ohio State winning it all. I think depending on the matchups, it's almost impossible to pick the matchups. It's hard enough to pick 4 teams.
Right.
I'd like to see Ohio State Georgia rematch in the final this year.
I don't want to watch a rematch. Game. I don't want to watch a rematch if it's not the same players.
By the way, you're always going to see a rematch until we get to this 12-team playoff. Do you know that this format started in 2014? Only 12 different teams have made it to the Final Four in 8 years.
Isn't that crazy?
9 years, and 7 different teams have made it to the final. That's it. In 9 years. That's amazing to me.
No, but I said Alabama. Minnesota's my wild card. Michigan and Georgia. That's the 4.
What was the 4th one? Georgia.
Yeah. Alabama. Washington.
Oh, Washington. Right. You're going to give me a winner?
Michigan and Georgia. What?
You're going to give me a winner out of those 4?
I think Alabama.
National champion. That is a hot take, no matter where they're ranked. They're ranked 4, and a lot of people saying they're overranked. Right. I am too. But Nick Saban, again, I will never discount Nick Saban because he is the greatest football coach of all time.
Their schedule.
And dispute that.
I think their schedule favors them a lot more than people think.
Rick is bashing you for your draft again, rated an F. I don't know how ESPN rated it. Are you talking about Yahoo? Because we did it on Yahoo, didn't we? Yeah, Yahoo. Well, maybe ESPN. Unless you had another draft that he's looking at that I don't know about. That's possible.
Yeah, look, I'm picking Michigan too because I know of a guy whose son plays on Michigan, and I'm hoping that he does big things as a wide receiver this year.
So. Good. Well, Anthony's all over Michigan as his second choice, which is interesting because he's got Ohio State as his first choice. So he's right about TCU. I do think TCU will have a tough year this year. They got a lot of guys to replace, not just Max Duggan, but their top running back or top wide receiver. I mean, they got a lot of guys to replace. So I think they will struggle a little this year. And I will say the best race in football this year, college football, will be the AAC, which I know has lost some luster because of the 3 teams that left.
Yeah.
But I think the race between Tulane and Texas San Antonio will be awesome this year. They're going to be 2 very underrated teams.
Yeah, and they always play good. They always have good games. They're not always the best games, but they have good games during the year.
Agreed.
2 or 3.
All right. Well, I'll give you a mulligan next week. If you want to change your picks, I'll let you do that. Just make sure you point it out to me. Otherwise, I'm holding you to these 4 picks.
All right.
For the year, because I'll have to do a repick probably at mid-season myself.
Watch out! And I'm sorry about the picture log, but again, Stetson Bennett was a bigger teammate than people think.
I don't disagree. I just think they'll find a way to get done. And Kirby Smart has really kind of figured it out down there. So anyway, great topics today. Great input, Carlos. Thank you. We only had one big disagreement where I knew we'd have it, so I thought I'd throw that in today. Rick, Kenny, Anthony, Alec, where else I'm missing here today? I apologize if I missed you. Thanks for tuning in. You guys who watch later, thanks for watching. Guys, we'll see you next week with another edition of Are You Serious? And I'm going to
Friday, people.
Have a great weekend. See you Sunday. Bye-bye.